All right, folks, buckle your seatbelts. Though if we're talking about the early days of NASCAR, you probably won't find any seatbelts, just a prayer, a moonshine jug, and a whole lot of bad ideas. This, my friends, is the twisted history of NASCAR. How bootleggers, busted up cars, and some very fast Southern boys turned outrunning the law into America's loudest, fastest sport. Let's rewind to the 1920s and 30s, back when the United States was knee-deep in prohibition. That's right, when the government decided Americans had enough fun and banned booze. But if there's one thing this country does better than making rules, it's figuring out how to break them. Enter the Moonshiners, backwoods chemists who cooked up their own homemade liquor in secret stills deep in the hills of the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, and beyond. Now, making moonshine was one thing. Getting it to thirsty customers without getting caught by the feds, that was the real challenge. You couldn't just drive a wagon into town with fresh booze painted on the side. No, you needed a car that looked ordinary on the outside but had a whole lot of muscle under the hood. These were the original sleeper cars, Grandma's Ford coupe on the outside, but souped up with extra carburetors, reinforced springs, and enough horsepower to outrun the sheriff's brand new ride. If you enjoyed this wild ride through NASCAR's twisted history, give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And run they did. Moonshiners became expert drivers, racing through winding dirt roads, across creeks and over mountains, with a trunk full of white lightning and a police siren screaming behind them. These guys weren't just delivering liquor. They were perfecting the art of high-speed driving. Some say they could drift around corners before the word drift was even invented. But here's the twisted part. Once you spend your nights outrunning Johnny Law, what do you do on your days off? Well, naturally, you brag about how fast your car is. And if another moonshiner brags louder, you challenge him to a race. Pretty soon, you've got farmers, bootleggers, and the whole town showing up to watch two outlaws tear across a dirt field to prove who's the king of the backroads. These impromptu races turned into organized events, especially in the South. Folks started building dirt tracks, sometimes just plowing a circle in a pasture. The crowds grew, the bets got bigger, and the cars got crazier. Nobody cared about safety. Roll cages weren't a thing, helmets were optional, and seatbelts? Forget it. Some drivers swore they'd rather be thrown clear than trapped inside a tumbling car. That's twisted history, folks. Now let's fast forward to the late 1940s. World War II had just ended, and a lot of young men came home with two things: mechanical skills from working on planes and tanks, and a thirst for excitement. Combine that with moonshiner racing culture, and you had a recipe for something huge. Enter Bill France Sr., a man with a vision bigger than Talladega. France saw all these wild races happening with no rules, no structure, and a whole lot of fistfights. Drivers would win races and never get paid because the promoter skipped town with the ticket money. Cars didn't meet any standards. One guy might be running a souped-up V8, while another was basically in a tractor. It was chaos. France figured, what if we organized this madness? What if we made an actual league with rules, schedules, and payouts? So in 1948, at the Streamline Hotel in Daytona Beach, Florida, a pastel Art Deco spot that looks like the kind of place you'd order a daiquiri, not start a red-blooded racing empire, Bill France gathered drivers, mechanics, and promoters. They hammered out a plan, and just like that, NASCAR was born, the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing. But don't let that fancy title fool you. Stock car racing still had moonshine in its veins. A lot of the early NASCAR legends, guys like Junior Johnson, were former bootleggers who swapped running liquor for running laps. In fact, Junior Johnson was so good at outrunning the cops that he became known as the last American hero. He even served time for moonshining but went on to become a NASCAR Hall of Famer. Talk about a twisted career path, from federal prison to Daytona 500 champion. Speaking of Daytona, let's talk about the beach. Before the big superspeedways were built, races were literally held on the sand. Cars tore down the beach at 100 miles an hour, then made a turn onto the pavement of Highway A1A, then back onto the sand. Picture it. Engines roaring, seagulls scattering, and some poor family just trying to enjoy their picnic while two Fords nearly run them over. It was dangerous, it was dusty, and it was glorious. By the 1950s and 60s, NASCAR started building real tracks, and the sport grew fast. The drivers were working-class heroes, guys in greasy coveralls who risked their necks every weekend. The fans loved it, and the car companies loved it even more. Because here's the deal. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. If a Chevy won a big race, dealerships would see sales spike the next day. That's why manufacturers poured money into the sport, because bragging rights sold cars. Of course, NASCAR's history is filled with wild moments. Cars flying into the stands, fights breaking out in the pits, and fans sneaking moonshine into the grandstands in Coca-Cola cups. One famous race in 1979, the Daytona 500, ended with a fistfight on live national TV after two drivers wrecked each other on the last lap. Millions of Americans, snowed in by a blizzard, watched these good old boys punch each other on the track. NASCAR had officially gone mainstream. And through it all, that twisted DNA of moonshine and rebellion never really left. Even today, while NASCAR runs billion-dollar operations with corporate sponsors and polished tracks, its roots go back to a dirt road in the South, a trunk full of illegal whiskey, and a driver with nothing to lose but his freedom. So the next time you see those cars flying around Daytona or Talladega, remember, NASCAR didn't start in a boardroom. It started in the backwoods, with bootleggers who just wanted to get their shine to market and prove they were faster than the law. It's a sport built on speed, danger, and a whole lot of stubborn Southern pride. And if that isn't twisted history, I don't know what it is. Junior Johnson, 1931-2015, known as the Last American Hero, title of a famous 1973 movie and Tom Wolfe article. Started as a moonshine runner in North Carolina before turning to racing. Won 50 NASCAR races as a driver in the 1950s and 60s. Famously discovered the technique of drafting, tucking in behind another car to reduce wind resistance, which revolutionized the sport. Later became a team owner, helping drivers like Darrell Waltrip and Cale Yarborough win championships. Even though he served time in federal prison for moonshining, he was eventually pardoned by President Ronald Reagan in 1986. Richard Petty, B. 1937, nicknamed the King of NASCAR, holds the record for 200 career wins, a number that's unlikely ever to be beaten. Won the Daytona 500 7 times and the NASCAR Championship 7 times. Famous for his cowboy hat, sunglasses, and easygoing personality, he became the face of NASCAR in the 1970s and 80s. His number 43 STP car is one of the most iconic vehicles in sports history. Dale Earnhardt Sr., 1951-2001, known as the Intimidator, won 76 races and 7 championships, tying Richard Petty for the most at the time. Famous for his aggressive driving style, he wasn't afraid to rattle someone's cage to win. Tragically died in a crash on the final lap of the 2001 Daytona 500, a moment that shocked the entire sports world. His legacy led to major safety improvements in NASCAR, including the Hans device, head and neck restraint. His son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., went on to become a superstar in his own right. Cale Yarborough, 1939-2023, one of the toughest competitors in NASCAR history, won 3 consecutive championships, 1976-1978, the first driver to ever do so. Won the Daytona 500 4 times. Famously got into a fistfight with Donnie Allison after a crash in the 1979 Daytona 500. The fight was televised live, helping catapult NASCAR into national popularity. Fireball Roberts, 1929-1964. Real name Edward Glenn Roberts, Jr. Nicknamed Fireball, not for racing but because he was a baseball pitcher in high school. One of NASCAR's first true superstars, with 33 career wins. Tragically died after a fiery crash in the 1964 World 600 in Charlotte, which pushed NASCAR to begin investing in safer fuel cells, fireproof suits, and improved helmets. Darrell Waltrip, B. 1947, won 84 NASCAR races and 3 championships. Known for his colorful personality and famous catchphrase, "Boogity, boogity, boogity, let's go racing, boys," when he became a broadcaster. A fierce competitor in the 1970s and 80s, he also had legendary rivalries with drivers like Dale Earnhardt. Jeff Gordon, B. 1971. One of the drivers who brought NASCAR into the mainstream in the 1990s, won 93 races and 4 championships. His clean-cut California style contrasted with the southern good old boys, helping NASCAR expand to a nationwide audience. Later became a broadcaster and team owner. Thanks for watching, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this wild ride through NASCAR's twisted history. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and come back next week for more twisted history stories. Until then, keep your engines running and your stories even wilder.